Hi everyone, this is Dr. Young. The course here is COR 171, The Four Horsemen, History at the Extremes. This, of course, at Flagler College. This video is particularly going over how this looks in a summer course. If you were not watching this in the summer, then the syllabus will differ in some details, but a lot of it should be the same. What are the four horsemen? Well, in the book of Revelation, there is some imagery of four horses that are harbingers of the end of the world. This, of course, in the Christian tradition. And the four horses, or the four horsemen, the riders on the horses, that is, are war, famine, pestilence, and death. And so this is a course that focuses on those four things. We will be looking at a particular time period, specifically the High and Late Middle Ages, roughly around the year 1100 to around the year 1500. We will examine some other time periods, and we'll even try to draw some parallels with recent times. There are, of course, some interesting comparisons that can be made between, say, the Black Death of the 14th century and the recent COVID pandemic, which all of us have a lot of memories of. This video being made in the year 2024, so that should resonate with many students here. But there are some recent wars as well, and we can perhaps draw some interesting comparisons between the wars that we'll be examining in this class with the recent wars in places like Ukraine and Israel-Palestine. This is a core course. It fulfills the requirement in historical inquiry. The value pathway for this course is citizenship with integrity. And one of the things that we will be looking at is, how people respond to these extreme circumstances, what that does to their sense of belonging to a community. Does this drive people to be more committed to their community? Does it lead to kind of abandonment of, the people they are responsible for? I think we will see responses that run the gamut of those things. But we're really thinking about what it means to be a citizen, particularly during times of extremes. The course is online and will be asynchronous. However, I will run a live session every Thursday during the course at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. There is a Zoom link you can see here. And so if you tune in at Thursday at 11 a.m., if you're somewhere else in the world in a different time zone, you'll have to adjust, obviously, but I will be there. And this is optional, but I will say in past online classes I've taught, students who have attended these synchronous sessions have found great benefit in them. It's certainly not a requirement if you want to succeed in the class, but I often will go over upcoming assignments and maybe look at some course materials that are particularly tricky. And so I would highly recommend trying to find time in your schedule to attend some of those. If you attend one or two of those and you feel like you don't necessarily need that, that's totally fine. I'm definitely not going to judge you at all. I'm not taking attendance or anything. If nobody shows up, I usually wait about 10 minutes and then shut it off. So if you show up at 11:15 or whatever, if you're late and nobody's there, just know that I waited about 10 minutes and decided to go do other things. Please note my email address. That's the most important means of communication I have with you in addition to Canvas. And so use the email address for all communications in this course. I already talked about the subject matter of the course, right? The extreme situations. And that this course will focus in particular on the High and Late Middle Ages in Europe specifically. Around 1100 to around 1500. This will get us into topics like the Crusades and the Black Death, the Great Famine of the 14th century, as well as medieval conceptions of death and the dying and the afterlife and those sorts of things. Most importantly, and this is where we kind of get into the learning outcomes, if you have taken history classes in the past, say in secondary education, where you've had to, where it's all been all about content, where the goal is to, learn lots of trivia of history. This is going to be a very different kind of course. Hopefully, you've had history classes that delve a little deeper than just learning kind of the basic timeline and those sorts of things. We are going to be reading historical sources. And there are two kinds of sources that historians talk about. This is under learning outcome number 3. There are primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources, and I will say more about this in a later lecture, but let me just give you a brief introduction here. Primary sources are sources, and these can be written documents. They can also be other things. Things like art can constitute very powerful primary sources. Artifacts, material remains that are left behind, and written documents of various kinds, right? One of the things that you have to learn about a particular time period, whatever you're studying, is that there are conventions of writing. There are genres that exist that may not exist in other time periods, right? And so it would be wonderful if we could study the Middle Ages by looking at journals and diaries that people wrote from that period, but people did not write journals and diaries in the Middle Ages. Writing materials were far too expensive to do something so frivolous as record your private thoughts at the end of a given day. And so we don't have sources like that. Instead, we have other things like saints' lives, and charters and sermons, and works of literature along the lines of, say, Dante's Divine Comedy, which we will look at some parts of in this class, right? And so we have to learn what kinds of sources existed in this period, what sorts of things were written, as well as other kinds of sources that we might consult, things like art. And we will look at some art in this class, actually a fair amount of it. But primary sources are things that come from the actual time period in question. Secondary sources, by contrast, are things written afterwards. They are really studies of the time period written by modern scholars that examine the primary sources and draw interpretations of those things. This class will be focused most intently on primary sources. I will mention secondary sources, and there is introductory material in some of the primary sources that I will assign you that you might read, and those sort of constitute secondary sources. They're written by modern editors of these things. So you need to read lots of primary sources in this class, and you should be prepared to do that. The other learning outcomes kind of spring from the reading of the sources. One of these is that we will examine questions of causality. What causes what? Why do people do the things they do? What influences them to behave in a certain way, both at the individual level and at the level of the collective, right? Why did kingdoms of the Middle Ages, kind of do what they did, try to conquer the territories they conquered, or respond to a crisis like the Black Death and the way they responded? What caused them to think the way that they did and respond the way they did? The historians also work on questions of continuity and change over time, and try to think, okay, what stayed the same and what has been different, and why have those changes taken place? So we'll try to engage with those kinds of questions. We will also think a little bit about the impact of the past on the present, and we'll do that in a comparative way. There's one assignment in particular toward the end of the course where you'll have to do some comparison between the medieval and the modern to see what has remained the same and what has changed. Maybe the most important word that I could teach you about history is the word context. Everything has a context. If we're looking at a particular time period, we have to understand not only the immediate stuff that's in the source, but the background behind it, right? I might ask you, why are you sitting in front of a computer listening to this video lecture today? You know, what has led you to this path? And there is a context for that. You, at some point in your life, learned that there is a value to receiving a higher education, to getting a college degree. This may have to do with, you may have been, influenced by family or by teachers or by society more generally. You may have had friends who inspired you. You may have, some of your own personal experiences that have led you to behave the way that you do. That's all part of context, and historians are very concerned about the issue of context. When looking at the past, right, we have to understand the context to explain the behavior. This is where the critical analysis of history comes in. And learning history really is an exercise in learning how to do critical analysis of the past, because the past is not just self-evident. It's not just this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's these things happen, but we want to know why they happened. We want to know why people behave the way they did. To explain why they behave the way they did, we have to understand the context they came from. That can be the cultural context. What were the values or the beliefs or the stories they told each other? What was the kind of visual culture of the time period? Like, how did all of that bear on the decisions that people made? It could have to do with the social context, like where did they live and in what circumstances did they live? Did they live in a village? Did they live in a town? What was the political authority like? How did that impact the way they thought and the way they behaved? Right. So there are institutional contexts. If we're examining the writings of a medieval monk, we need to know what the institution that monk belonged to did for them, what kinds of strictures or lifestyles that it imposed on them, and how that would influence their worldview. And so I will have plenty to say about this in later lectures, but you have to understand context. And a lot of our exercises will be efforts in linking up the context with the specific evidence from the primary sources that we'll be reading. All right, that's enough, I think, by way of introduction to the material of the course. Let me go over briefly some of the nuts and bolts of this. You need to purchase or obtain in some way 2 books for this class. One of these is John Aberth's book called From the Brink of Apocalypse, Confronting Famine, War, Plague, and Death in the Later Middle Ages. This is a textbook of sorts. There will be readings from this in most weeks, really as kind of background reading to help give us the historical context. I will add to that in some video lectures, and that will prepare us then to read the primary sources. The other book is called The Black Death. It's edited by Rosemary Horrocks. This is a collection of primary sources about the Black Death. There are a lot of other readings. Okay, if we look at the schedule for the course, this course runs week to week, like most summer courses do. And every week you have some things to read. The first week you have to read some selections from 2 works about how to think about history. And those will be in PDF form on Canvas. They're actually there already. In fact, if I go to, get out of this, if I go to the Canvas page for this course, okay, and you look under modules, right, this is the whole of week 1, everything you need to do in week 1, and we could look at the one on the website, but this is in the app. Everything for week 1 that you have to do is here. All of the video lectures you have to watch, other than this first one that I'm currently making. The syllabus is here. That's what you need to read that. Here are the Gilderhus and the Presnell works you need to read. There will be a discussion board. I haven't got that up there yet. And then the assignments for the first week. And so look under the modules tab. Right, modules here. Okay, that's where you're going to find everything you need to do week to week. Lots of, all right, let me get to the right place. I got someone trying to call me. There we go. So you can see that, this is all laid out very carefully. Keep the syllabus handy. You'll know exactly what you need to do every week. You can see that, Week 2, you need to read some pages 1 through 5 from Aberth and some other things, some things from the Bible. That will all be laid out there on Canvas. And if you look at week 2, you can see the readings you need to do here. Okay. Let's talk briefly about course assignments. I don't want this to run too long. Every week of this course, and this runs week to week, and you need to do this within each week. This is not something you can go back and do later. You need to participate in the discussion board. There will be a prompt for this, a bunch of questions that I'm posing to you, and you don't have to answer every one of those questions, okay? You can even just answer one if you like, if you can do it at some length, but you have an initial post every week that you have to do. You'll not be able to see the posts of others until you post yourself. This is normally due Thursday. The last week of the course is short, and so I'm going to make it due on Wednesday that week, but normally due on Thursday. And then by Sunday, the weeks run Monday to Sunday in this course, except for the last week, which is only Monday through Friday. And the last week of the course has fewer assignments and things. And so by Sunday, you need to make 3 responses to the posts made by your classmates. What do you put into these posts? Well, answer the questions for one, but then feel free to ask your own questions about things, right? Particularly in the responses. I don't just want the responses to be, I really like your post or something like that, right? Try to further the conversation that's going on about the issues we're examining in the course. You have to finish these by Sunday. I will try to grade these on Monday or Tuesday of the following week. And the grade we put in, and if you make a late response, then it's not going to be graded. You won't get any credit for it. So you need to get these done in the week in question. The first week of the course, you have a research scavenger hunt. There will be a video about this assignment, but you need to complete this during the first week. This is not terribly difficult. It's really just going on to the webpage of the Proctor Library and finding some information and learning how to do some research in academic sources. If you have questions about that, you can reach out to me. You can post them on the discussion board. There are primary sources. So the major assignments for this course, okay, there are 3 essays and then 3 what are called worksheet assignments. All right. The worksheets, and there will be a video about this, but, if you go to the assignment here, there is a document, okay, and you can see what you have to do for this, right? This is really just like, there's a source that you need to read, or there are several sources you need to read. You choose one of these and kind of, work through that worksheet, answer all of the questions on there. You need to do 3 of these. Now, in weeks 1 and 2, these are required. For weeks 3 and 4, you have 2 of these analysis papers, which are longer prompted papers. You have to do 2 of those over the course of weeks 3, 4, and 5. The other week, so say you write an analysis paper in week 3 and week 4. In week 5, you can do the 3rd worksheet assignment. Or if you want to do the worksheet assignment in week 3 and then write the papers in week 4 and 5, or if you want to do the papers in week 3 and 5 and do the worksheet in week 4. It's up to you. Okay, but at the end of the course, you have to have turned in 3 worksheet assignments and 2 analysis papers. You can see the analysis papers are worth double what the worksheets are. The worksheets are more kind of a straightforward, here are some questions to answer about this. The analysis papers need to be more polished, have a thesis, have an argument, have evidence that backs that up, okay? And you'll see in the prompts what these look like. In the final week of the course, I'm asking you to write a 4 to 5 page essay that compares medieval and modern responses to either pestilence or pandemic or war. You can't do both. So choose either pestilence, right? So comparing the Black Death with COVID-19, or war, selecting some medieval wars and comparing that with modern wars, specifically the recent and ongoing wars in Ukraine and or Israel-Palestine. And I will give a prompt for this, all right? So that should be, there will be further instructions about that. Okay, I think the rest of this is fairly straightforward. Please refer back to the syllabus throughout the course. It's very important that you have this so that you know the assignments you need to do. Every week you should look at this and say, okay, I got to read Aberth, I need to read the sources that are posted on Canvas, and I need to watch these video lectures, and these are the assignments that are due. Here's the discussion board posts, and here's the the worksheet or the source analysis that I need to get done week 4, right? Week 6, you got the past and present paper that's due actually a few days after the semester or the term ends. It's due the Monday following the end of the term. But you got to make those posts that week. Okay, so keep this handy. Make sure you look at it frequently and keep on track. I will create a discussion board, last thing, called Course Logistics. And if you have questions about the course itself, about any of the requirements, please post those questions on Course Logistics. You are certainly welcome to reach out to me individually via email, but it's important. Chances are, if you have a question about some assignment or some aspect of the course, other people probably have the same question. If you post it on Course Logistics, then that question is out there for everyone to see, and they can refer to that. And I can give a single answer to everyone in the course. So please use the Course Logistics discussion board as it's intended. All right. Thank you, and I will see you in discussion boards and in future lectures.